My name is Dmitri. I come from Moscow. Actually, a short flight, but that took away my night's sleep today, so don't mind me being a bit laggy today. It's my jet lag. I work in St. Philaret's Institute, Christian Institute in Moscow, so I'm also a Christian believer myself. And 4 years ago, I got involved with a Neos project. It's just curious, whoever heard about Neos before? Wow, quite a few people. We are that popular, yay. Yeah, so it's for those who don't know, it's an open source content management system. And we started using it for work. And I got so much into it that I became a core team member later on. And so today we are going to be speaking, well, not about Neos itself, but about the rewrite of the user interface of Neos from Ember into React. You guessed it right. So a few words about Neos. It's used by a few brands that are quite known here in Austria and in Germany, and many others, of course. And from the inside, the management interface of the system looks somehow like this. At the core of it, you see the website as the visitors see it, and you can edit it inline directly. So that's like a big selling point of the system, that you don't require a lot of time for training your editors. And so that in itself already provides a big challenge. How do you create a React app that allows you to enter existing websites and not break everything? And first of all, probably you are curious why we even started this idea of rewriting from Ember to React. And yeah, so it's not so much about Ember actually. We loved Ember, but our user interface was so much outdated. We were running Ember version 1, and it wasn't really maintained, and it was actually a mess. So we were thinking of migrating to the latest version at that time, and we spent half a year doing that, and then just got desperate and decided, like, let's just rewrite it from scratch. And some people came and say, hey, if we are rewriting from scratch, let's use the most hyped up technology that's currently available. Why should we still using Ember? And people said, no, we're not going to do that. So we turned down that idea. But later on, a guy from outside the team just came on our forum and posted, say, hey, here we are with my friend. We just spent like 10 days after Christmas. And we created a prototype in React of your whole backend management interface. And we thought, wow, that sounds really cool. And more developers got into looking into this prototype, and we really liked it. And then we had a lengthy discussion that took 3 months. So that's like a sneak peek behind the scenes of like a larger open source project. That's how the decisions are made. We just basically argue until like the last one's left standing there in the really long thread. So yeah, but the React team won, and we started doing the rewrite. And we ended up using like a pretty trivial stack for today's standard. But believe me, in 2015 it was really hyped up technology. It looks modern. It looks boring now, but back then it was really cool. Whom of you know all of this stuff by heart, like Redux and React and even less than Neos. So Neos is more popular than React. That's an interesting discovery. But anyways, I'm not going to go deep into selling this particular stack. It's not the topic of my talk. I'm just gonna give you an outline of our rewrite. So it took us 2 years to complete the first stable version of the user interface. That was twice as long as we initially anticipated, and we initially anticipated that it would take twice as long, so we matched our initial expectations, kind of. And then it took another year until this moment, and last year we also spent a lot of energy into stabilizing the project, because we have thousands of installations, and with every new installation migrating to the new version, we had new problems. I mean, that's the way things go. But right at this point, we are pretty stable, I would say. And that's a good thing that we managed it. So was it worth it? And yes, actually, I'm quite sure it is. The general stability has improved, loading performance, perceived performance. We baked in a few features, of which I'm going to talk later now, that were not possible to fit into the old architecture. And also we got more freedom in choosing the right ingredients in our stack, because Ember gave you a monolith architecture, and it was really hard to do things our way there. But with React, React is really not opinionated about anything else, the way you do data fetching, anything validation. But there's a bitter side to the rewrite, that it took us 2 years and 5,000 commits from 59 contributors, over 600 closed issues, and 80 still open. And yeah, you see over 1,000 closed pull requests. So that was really a lot of exhausting work, and naturally the most exhausting part is getting it to be stable. To stabilize, and but there are some things that we've gained, and today I decided to talk more about the topic of extensibility, because the rest of the rewrite is it's just a kind of basic Redux apps, just at the big size, so there's not much exciting to talk about. But at the heart of our system, of Neos itself, is the topic of extensibility. And when you're creating a website with Neos, nothing comes in stock, you create everything from scratch, custom, tailor-made for your project. And we wanted to have the same experience from the user interface, so you could replace any part of it, customize it, both in planned and in unplanned ways. And for example, here's just a smaller subset of the UI, and here you see this red area. We call it the inspector area. You have a focused element on the page, and then you're able to edit some properties of it that you don't want to edit inline. And it was always a standard feature that you could create custom inspector editors, like for example a text field, or I don't know, image upload or anything. So you could create your own. For example, a color picker. So an editor could pick a color of, I don't know, of a background on a page or something. That was an example of planned extensibility we always said that this is our API. You can create custom editors. This is how you do it. But in addition to that, we wanted to be able to plug in or override any code anywhere on the page. And to do that, we needed a mechanism for having this global configuration of everything we are doing, of the list of registries, the list of UI containers, data loaders, etc., etc., etc. So we introduced this concept of registry, kind of like Windows registry, but yeah. So that was a central place where people could hook into their custom implementations. And also we needed a defined point in time when these modifications were allowed, and these are allowed now in manifest files. So you're only allowed to alter that configuration in a manifest file and at a certain point in booting the UI. So if you would allow it to do it dynamically, it would really turn into a mess later on. So we got these two constraints, and so we are basically loading all the plugins from userland plugins and then initializing their manifest files, then freezing the registry and resuming the boot process from that point on. And here's just an example of things that we are, just one more thing I need to say about this. So the trigger question is how to add the dynamically how to dynamically load the code from the user into already statically compiled built main architecture. We didn't want the users to recompile, rebuild the whole application itself. So we would have their JavaScript code loaded in an additional script tag, but then if we want them to be able to use, for example, React, we don't want to have two instances of React on the page, so we need to expose both the vendor libraries that we are using, like React, and the internals of Neos itself to those plugins. And for that, we are using the Webpack's alias feature. We are exposing parts of the user interface and parts and some libraries in basically in a window object, as a property on a window object. And then when we are building with Webpack, we are just kind of replacing the original dependencies with a path to this kind of fake library attached to the window object. And that allows us to have this architecture where there's one instance of React, always one instance of Redux, and all plugins, no matter at what point in time they're loaded, they can still share it. So that came in quite nicely. And I'll just get a bit more practical with this color picker example. So first of all, we have this package, like a plugin author creates this package.json file, and he requires the Neos UI Extensibility package that provides him the build scripts with all the necessary Webpack config, so he doesn't have to write the Webpack config because that can be quite cumbersome. And all he has to do is just kickstart this file and do the build, and he'll get the working plugin. And this is an example of a manifest file where we are hooking in a color picker editor and setting it to a registry as a color picker editor. And the React component that would be rendering the color picker itself is quite simple. Here it is. We are using a third-party React component to do the actual color picking. That's quite nice when you have access to the whole React ecosystem, that you can reuse any component you like in your plugins. So that's basically it. You hit yarn build. You configure Neos to load this extra plugin.js file, and you have a working color picker. So a few more, so this was an example of planned extensibility. This is what we support, what we declare as our API that we will maintain between versions and so on. But also we want to let people do crazy stuff. For example, replace the whole navigation module, the whole tree, like with, for example, with a flat navigation, or just with anything else. Yeah.
What the default option is?
Yeah, so default option is the tree, right? Thanks. So you don't always need the tree. Sometimes you just need a flat list of things like block articles. So here you, in addition to showing the tree, I've created just in a few hours this thing which does the flat list navigation. Or so this is how it's working on a technical side. So you see we have this container registry, and we are just setting the page tree, replacing the page tree container with this flat nav container. So it's rendering our new nav in the place of the old one. So we don't guarantee it would always work this way, but for custom projects where you like really need custom implementations, that's a good risk to take, and it works out really nicely in practice. Or like to get even more fancy, usually inline you can only type text, like have like rich text editing inline, but sometimes you want to have structured editing inline. So I just took all the inspector editors and put them inline inside the user website. For example, to be able to pick dates or I don't know, upload images directly without any interruptions. So I was giving a talk about Neos Extensibility this spring, and I had this idea a few hours before the talk in the middle of the night. So I thought, why don't I try to code something like this? So by the morning it was ready. I was again a bit sleepy during my talk, but I had it working. So I mean, that's just an example of what kind of things you can do. So just to emphasize again, all of this is like totally created from scratch. It's not part of Neos core. We are just reusing existing components. And yeah, so I see that I'm running out of time, but I just want to mention one more discovery along the way. Like the biggest pain in the S of the previous years of my content management system development was messing with rich text editors. We used to use an Alloy editor, then CK editor 4, and you always would fight already like an existing system and try to do it what you want and not what it thinks is the best. And then we just recently we discovered CK editor 5, which by the name of it didn't like sound as it's going to be like something really good, but actually it was. It was also a complete rewrite of an editor as an editing framework. They claimed to be an editing framework, and it took them 4 years to do the rewrite. That's quite amazing. I mean, their project is way more advanced than ours. So it can look as a basic editor, but under the hood, every feature of it comes as an independent plugin. For example, even moving a cursor or typing a key is implemented as a plugin. Like hitting a backspace button and erasing text is a plugin. So it's totally amazing. So for example, when we don't need bold formatting on a page, we just don't load that plugin. So if you really need just simple typing of text, you have 0 additional plugins besides the basic typing plugin loaded, and that makes it extremely lightweight and extremely robust and so on. So it's really amazing and a lot of fun to create your own custom plugins. We created about a dozen plugins since then for the Neos core itself, and it's just such big fun, so definitely check it out. I need to wrap up the talk, I guess. Basically, what are the lessons we've learned during this whole during these 3 years that have passed? Rewrites from scratch are really expensive. We were warned about this, and it's true, and it's super risky. So don't try that unless you really have to, because sometimes they pay off. So as a final conclusion, I would say that it was definitely worth it, but it was scarier than we anticipated. Also make friends with other open source projects along the way if you're doing some open source. I already gave you an example of a CK editor. We also had a really nice collaboration with Test Cafe end-to-end testing. If you never tried it, definitely try it out. I would need another 20 minutes to talk about it, and it's just super cool project. We contribute to it along the way and fix some bugs in it, but it's an amazing thing. And you definitely become a better developer in general when you're contributing to the right kind of open source project. So I've learned a lot in that time. So if you would like to, we would definitely love to have you on board, and we always have issues of all kinds of levels of complexity and simplicity as well that you can help with. So ping me if you're interested after the talk. And ja, und ich versuche Deutsch zu lernen. So, wenn du möchtest mit mir Deutsch zu sprechen, es würde sehr gut für mich sein. So, danke schön.